Have you got your nets ready?
Yeah.
Raise your nets in the air. Catch only what you are supposed to. I don't want anybody who's part of butterflies catching mice.
Okay.
What attracted you to attend Lancashire BioBlitz compared to other events at school?
Well, first of all, obviously, you have to be asked. But no, seriously, I mean, I've asked quite a lot of things. I wanted, on short-term terms, I was rather looking forward to doing something British, if I can put it that way, because as it happens, I've been travelling quite a lot over the past few months, and I felt, I've lost touch with what's going on at home, and it doesn't matter where you go, I find that getting back to a good old British reserve in the rain, you know, there's a lot to be said for that, and it sounded a very interesting event as well, very.
Okay, how did you first become interested in wildlife in natural world?
Oh God. Well, I'm afraid I was a juvenile delinquent many years ago. I'm happy to say people of this generation wouldn't do this, but back in the 1940s, nearly every schoolboy was an egg collector. Not, I'm bound to say, on a particularly destructive level, but it was something you did, and that's what I did. And as it happens, not very far from here, because I was born in Rochdale, and I remember very well finding my first nest in Rochdale, and taking my first egg, starting the collection there. But fortunately, I very rapidly got more interested in the birds themselves. And I have to admit, I learnt a lot when I was out in the countryside, even the privet hedges of inner Rochdale, as they then were and probably still are. You know, actually, it was interesting, actually, come to think of it, because one of the first nests I found was a hedge sparrow's nest, and there was a cuckoo's egg in it, which I've never seen a cuckoo's egg again since in the whole of my life. And also, when I think about it, I wonder how many cuckoos they get in the middle of Rochdale these days.
Quite often, the most memorable wildlife experiences people have are unexpected and spontaneous. From your many years as a wildlife enthusiast, tell us about an experience that's special to you.
Yes, first of all, let me say, I think you're absolutely right. I find the unexpected, even when it involves something very common, you know, the species in common, far more exciting than, for example, going off twitching, as I say, you know, as a bird watcher. You know what's there, you can just miss it. You might see it or you miss it, but there's no excitement in that sense to me. I mean, I've done that, but it's but the unexpected is always the best experience. And I think the one that sticks in my mind was, I think it was my first time I saw a wild otter, when I was actually filming, except that we were having lunch. This was on the east coast of Scotland, and we were having lunch, and we were tucking into their fish and chips, and the lady who ran the cafe came in and said, "Have you seen our otter?" And I said, "No, where is it?" And she said, "Oh, it comes outside here fairly often." And I said, "Oh yeah, fine, you know, carry on eating." And I looked up and said, "What's that?" And there was a boy about sort of 200 yards offshore with something on it. I said, "I think that's an otter." And there was only me and the cameraman moved. All the rest of it was carried on tucking in. He said, "Shall we?" "Yeah, come on." And we not only saw an otter, the otter just started swimming towards us, came closer and closer and closer. I've never had such a good view since. You know, it was sitting on the shore, demolishing what was left of an eel, and completely unexpected like that. You know, and that was so satisfying, not just exciting, satisfying.
Today holds the launch of the Lancashire Environmental Record.
Yes.
From your experience and knowledge of wildlife issues, why is it important to survey?
I think it's a really interesting subject. It's perhaps even more interesting than people realise instantly, because naturalists have always kept records, but until relatively recently they've had a terrible tendency to keep them to themselves. You know, so I've been guilty of it myself. I'd got bird records, not so much from Lancashire, but from Birmingham where I then lived, you know, going back to 1950 something. and you just keep them. And most bird watchers in particular, most butterfly collectors, wildflower people, keep records, but they don't do anything with them. It's just like, you know, their own personal diary. And in fact, it can't be stressed too strongly that information is absolutely vital. A, when there's a threat to an area, because, you know, in simple terms, if somebody comes along and says, well, we're going to drain that pond, and you say, no, don't, it's really good. And they say, oh yeah, prove it. Well, how can you prove it? If you've got a pile of records going back 10 years saying, look, they get this, they get this, they get this, these are breeding there, etc., etc. That is what it's absolutely so valuable for. And the other thing is to possibly discover new areas that can be saved, you know, and protected.
I find it's sort of like a good way to sort of protect wildlife.
Yes.
You know, safety sort of legal proceedings and things.
That's exactly it. Exactly it. Yeah, it's evidence, my lord. You know, it really is. It really is that. It's some sort of discussion of when something going ahead. If nothing else, you can delay it. I've always said, carry a pocket full of great crested newts. Drop a couple of those in, and they'll have to delay it for a while, if nothing else. I don't suggest that for real, by the way. Actually, it's not a bad idea.
I'm sure you get lots of people asking you what your favourite bird is. I'd like to ask, out of all the animals in Britain, which do you find the most comical?
Comical? Well, it's just because they make... There's animals or birds which sometimes make me laugh, not necessarily permanently. I can't even look at a rat without falling over with laughter. It's a real cliche, but my robins in my garden actually do make me laugh. There's a pair of robins there, as many people have, but they are so canny and fearless and enterprising that I actually sometimes go, I don't believe that, you know. And it was like the other night, the other night, I was looking, I'd got various things in my moth trap. I kept having a little moth trap in the garden. And I'd put them all down in their little jars, you know. And the robin immediately came up there and started pecking at the jars. I thought, there's food in there, and realised he couldn't. So he just hung around. And every time I let a moth go, he just shot down and ate it. I thought, this is terrible. I'm feeding my moths to the robin. But I don't know what I could have done about it. You know, I said, I'll keep them again and let them out at night. I suppose I should have done. And I have been doing that since. But it did make me laugh. I thought, you little, you know, okay, can't beat it.
Yeah, quite often when you sort of, you know, looking at sort of certain animals for a time, you get to sort of know the personality.
Absolutely, yes. No, and somebody years ago, there was a really nice book called Birds as Individuals. I don't know, I'm sure it's way out of print, but I bet you can get it on eBay for £10,000 or something. And it's and that was exactly about that. It was about birds in the garden, which this woman had studied. And yes, there were definitely individual traits. There are probably shy robins somewhere. Unenterprising robins.
So I think I actually saw on maybe like a String Watch episode you actually feeding your hand.
Yeah. No, that's why I'm wondering whether it was robins again then in my garden, and I got them used to that, and I think most people can if you stick at it, you know. These two, funny enough, are not quite as tame as that. They'll come incredibly close, but they won't go on my hand, you know. Sort of saying, well, do that, put it down and we'll eat it. Oh, well. You find yourself talking to them all the time.
For all the enthusiastic children that will be going on with the mini-beast hunting today,
yes.
What tips and encouragement can you give to help them discover the wonders of wildlife?
I think I would have to say, and I know this is relevant to your organisation and to your purpose, I would say, for God's sake, don't give it up. Keep it up. You know, because, let's face it, primary school kids, I've never known a group of youngsters who won't be captivated by pond dipping in particular. They just will, you know. It's fascinating, it's fun, etc., etc., etc. But equally, unfortunately, secondary school, you know, when you get whatever it would be, 12, 13, so often is the dropout time. And so I would hope, pray and plead with the teenage community to say, for heaven's sake, it's perfectly hip to watch wildlife and to be interested in wildlife. I'd like to think I might even have helped a bit in that direction myself, because, you know, there was a time when it wasn't. When I was a kid, you know, it was just sort of old spinsters and colonels who went looking at wildlife, you know. And it would be shamed, as an act of shame at school. It would be booed and hissed and cajoled for being interested. Oh, it was a bird watcher, you know. But I think that's gone now with, you know, people like Chris Packer and so on and so forth. I think that's out of the way. We know that there's a valuable side product in the conservation ethic as well, and getting things done. So quite apart from just the interest in it, you know. And there's a lot of really interesting things there. You don't have to be sitting in front of that screen all the time. Get behind the camera instead.
Yeah, I found there's sort of maybe like patience is a good thing as well.
Yeah,
Sort of,
yeah. Patience is the, I would say, is one of the biggest attributes that you can acquire as any kind of watcher, you know. I mean, you have to have that for other things. If you're a painter, even, you have to have patience. You don't hurry too much, you know, as well. But certainly, I've always had to admit that the one thing that being, I was going to say teenage, I never got that far, but a sub-teenage egg collector was patience. That's what taught me more than anything else, being out there and getting to know the relationship of the birds to the habitat, which trees, which plants they like, the calls. That was another one. Lots of people these days, if I had to sort of say what do people have most trouble with, it's usually bird calls. You know, I say, I can't tell the calls. And I don't have, because I was out a lot as a kid, and it's just, yeah, you learnt patience, ever so valuable.
yes, I found it quite good. When you sort of get into wild, you sort of slow down. Sort of,
Yeah, yeah.
Say, you know, busy cities and towns. It's very difficult
Well,
once you get out into the sort of environment.
yeah, I mean, there is no doubt. Also, one of the most valuable contributions that having an interest in wildlife can make is therapeutic. There's no doubt about that. You know, people with problems in that area, which I have myself as it happens. I have a bipolar nature, and certainly, you know, I'd probably gone completely crazy if I wasn't able to get out in the countryside sometime. And I know a lot of people would add to that. It makes you feel better. It makes you feel better, and it's a kind of meditation. It takes your mind off other things. Once you are looking at something or for something, searching, you know, or through something with the camera, there's no better way to lose yourself completely than go out with a camera, a stills or video, and try to get the pictures you're after. Days can go by. You know, say, oh, should have gone home this weekend. But no, I think I love doing that, getting lost.
What benefits do you think today's event will have for people like wildlife?
Well, and I'm hoping, obviously, there's a very specific benefit because there is the record site, as it were, being launched, I suppose we call it. I can never remember what it is. It's McLearn spelt badly, isn't it? Record Network, the Lancashire Environmental Record Network, I think that's right, something like that, yes. And but that's all right. You've got to have one of those acronyms, whatever they call them. So that in itself, you know, is going to provide a service, if you like, not only for people who wish to contest developments or put up plans for the conservation thing, but just people who want to know something, you know, because I know the plans are to develop the site so that anybody basically is saying, oh, I'd love to know more about Lancashire wildlife, and go to that site and they'll get the links to just about everything, you know, the local moth clubs and bat clubs and everything else clubs, you know, which is great. You just go into one place. So there's that, and I'd like to think there'll be people who come along today. So we're fingers crossed for the weather, which is very nice at the moment. I'd like it better. I hope people will come along and see something that they didn't know was there, or they never looked at before. You know, I'm imagining that'll happen with pond dipping inevitably. It always does. Grown-ups should go pond dipping, definitely, because you think, oh, what on earth is that? You know, and then you explain. That is it. So I'm hoping that people will go in. They might come here as a bit of a bird watcher and go away as a dragonfly freak or something like that, you know, as well.